Joining us right now is actor-director Jim Caviezel. Jim, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thank you for having me, Sean.
Jim, you've been in some big movies. What's it like releasing a movie during a global pandemic when it's a little bit harder just to go out and want to see a movie in a theater?
Well, you're still making a thriller, right?
Yep.
We're the only film being released this weekend. So the competition really isn't there. And we went from like 1,400 screens to now 2,500. And most of the time in my industry, you'll never get a film like this made. They came to me, and because of my name value from a previous film I did with Mel Gibson, obviously they could get this one made. And so I read the story. I started thinking about this cancel culture, and Christianity is not too far away from being canceled as well. So we start with Iran. A viewer goes in watching that and saying, "Boy, is this really going on today?" Yes, it is. It's between three stories, so it's thinly disguised truth, just like you would see the movie The Godfather. You would know what coming out of that the mafia really does exist, and this is the same.
Jim, a lot of people aren't aware that religious persecution is still taking place around the world. What do you want the viewer to walk away with? What message?
Well, in the United States, my own country, I would have to say you're being persecuted right now by not being allowed to go to church. See, we have inalienable rights, the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and part of that happiness is also being mentally fit. And I don't understand when I see people in restaurants, in airports, and somehow reason the COVID doesn't travel. It doesn't do that. When you go and you can actually take your mask off and eat because, I'm going to play patty cake with you because COVID is afraid of you, and it could be eaten. When you're on an airplane, COVID knows not to jump off and go to the next person next to him, even though you're touching them. Why can't we go to church? Why can't you wear a mask in church and go into a church?
Jim, between this role and the role that you played in that Mel Gibson movie, Jesus, you've gone against the grain. You stand up for what you believe in. That's not something that normally happens in Hollywood. How difficult is it for you in this age of cancel culture to want to play roles and want to obviously succeed in a place like Hollywood?
I was really moved by Ronald Reagan. I don't live that far from the Reagan Library, and I was just going in there and I started listening to some of the things that he said, hard things he said, that would get many people killed, and they tried to kill him. But he did the right thing come hell or high water. I was moved by Jimmy Stewart and It's a Wonderful Life. And I thought, dear Lord, if I ever got a chance to do that I would come through. Well, then my time came. And the problem with that is you get an opportunity and they say, well, don't do this Passion of the Christ. If you do this movie, you may never work in this town again, okay? And immediately the studios turned that faucet off for me. I continued to work because a lot of great directors and a lot of great actors that I worked with put in good words for me, but I struggled. And when I heard Reagan say, and he said, those voices don't speak for the rest of us. You and I know it and do not believe that life is so dear and peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery. If nothing in life is worth dying for, when did this begin? Just in the face of this enemy, or should Moses have told the children of Israel to live in slavery amongst the pharaohs? Should Christ have refused the cross? Should the patriots at Concord Ridge have thrown down their guns and refused to fire the shot heard around the world? The martyrs of history were not fools, and our beloved dead who gave their lives to stop the advance of the Nazis did not die in vain. Where then lies the road to peace, you say? Well, it's a simple answer after all, that you and I have the courage to tell our enemies that there is a price we will not pay. There is a point beyond which evil must not advance. In the words of Ronald Reagan, evil is powerless if the good are unafraid.
Wow, that's powerful and powerful to hear you.
Well, you know him from person of interest in many films, including The Passion of the Christ. Would you please welcome back to our show the star of Infidel, Jim Caviezel. Well, Jim, welcome back. You look terrific. I love that suit, man.
And I love your tie.
This film is a true story, but a composite, really, of a lot of different things that have happened. Obviously, you were attracted to it, decided when you read the script that you wanted to do it. So why?
Because he's a man who stands up for what he believes in against, and that's really important in today's cancel culture, you know?
Yeah.
You don't see that. And so I started looking things up and reading about the 21 martyrs that were slaughtered on that beach in Libya, and they had a chance to, turn their backs on Christ. All they had to do is, go to Allah, and they were fine. But
They would have been allowed to live if they just renounced
That's
Jesus.
correct. They wouldn't do it,
Yeah.
and they put their love of Jesus Christ above their own lives to stand for the truth, and this character has that in him. Is he the right guy for the job? I would tell you he thinks he probably isn't, but something leads him there. And when you go back to the Gospels, you read about Paul, Peter, all these guys are martyrs.
Yeah.
Where would we be in having a church? We wouldn't have one if if Satan came up to you and said, look, I'll take your life. Oof, no way.
Jim, it's kind of sad because I think about people that are depicted in this film.
Yeah.
They've paid with their very blood
Right.
to stand up for Christ. And there
Yeah.
are people who get upset if they don't have their usual parking place when they go to church on Sunday. And they have no idea what it means to pay a price to follow Christ. And I hope this movie will help people to recognize that there's often a price to be paid for taking the stand that so many people are taking around the world.
But
Yeah.
look, we have it right here in the United States. We can't even go to church right now.
Yeah.
Okay? That's a violation of inalienable rights. And why our church leaders aren't speaking up and telling the state to go to hell. We've got to fight back. And there are very few people, and what's this guy's name? MacArthur.
Yeah, John MacArthur.
He stood up.
Yeah.
But he's a one guy.
Yeah.
Where's the rest of the buggers, And I have friends that have committed suicide. I have buddies. I'm wearing my trident here because several SEALs have killed themselves. And they needed Christ in the church. But I believe it was done intentionally. But as Christians, if we like that way of life, if we don't start standing up and pushing back, we will lose that way of life. It'll be a used to be Christian way of life. But even if there's just a couple of us that are willing to fight back, it's worth my life. That's, when you asked, why did you play this character? That's why I wanted to play this character, because I absolutely believe in that. They're not going to cancel Christianity.
Yeah. Jim, I cannot tell you how much I admire and appreciate your courage, because a lot of people in Hollywood simply won't take the stand you've taken. And this film is going to be controversial because it depicts Islam, radical Islam, for what it really is, and even talks about things like honor killings. Do you worry that there's going to be such a backlash by people like the Squad and others who will say that you're just a bigot, you're a racist, you're some kind of horrible person because you're in this film?
Well, then I just be in the big old pile of the rest of Americans, because we're all racists, aren't we now?
It sounds like it, doesn't it?
Yeah, by the time, once you scream wolf too many times, people aren't going to listen to you anymore. And that's why our media has lost credibility. Because when you don't stand up for the unborn, when you can kill them now, when they're in the third trimester, actually you can kill them now when they're out, in New York and Virginia. That's
awful.
a disgrace.
Yeah.
So I don't do that.
Yeah.
I don't stick my finger in the wind and worry like some politician. I was led by God Almighty to be here. And when I was a young boy, I saw movies like Ben-Hur. I was moved by them, and I was profound. I learned my Bible from that, because those images got in my head, and so it was a lot easier for me. They could get me to read by seeing those films, and then time goes by. Who would have thought? I didn't think I would be doing what I'm doing now, being on some screen playing a guy who's suffering representing people that are suffering for their faith, playing a guy who's suffering for his. But at some point, God calls you, and when He does call you, and He called me, it was done with the boy days. It was, Jim, I need you as a man now. That's your purpose. So